Okay, so the topic of my research is called A Victim of Another Kind. Distinguished by the Mediterranean Sea at its coastline, Beirut has long been known as the window of the East to the rest of the world. One of the highlights of life in Lebanon, and one that is the envy of its neighbors, is its open blue horizon. Thus, the controversy that struck my attention was sea pollution, a topic which has been marginalized in light of other crises in Lebanon. My project started off with a very general concept of sea pollution. I was able to map the Lebanese coastline, and I was able to see how each region is characterized by different types of pollutants and agents affecting human and non-human livelihoods. With the help of a diving center whose members are considered as volunteer marine activists, I had the opportunity to visit different regions and observe the controversies inflicted. With permits to build industrial factories at the coastline, to failed wastewater management systems and infrastructures, to the lack of public environmental awareness among many, the problem with my research at this point was its macro aspect. This made it revolve around in circles leading to closed ends. After flattening the surface, one controversy stood out from the bunch, and which through extensive research made me feel that it hasn't been discussed thoroughly and should be revisited. In the summer of 2006, two forces invaded the Lebanese Mediterranean coast, each provoking a significant battle. Only one was human and stole the lights, while the other had much of a greater impact, damaging generations to come. The Israeli airstrike on the G8 tanks caused a major oil spill in the sea and on its shores. While the Lebanese were busy trying to protect their lives, the oil spills had caused tremendous damages. How is the sea a silenced war victim? To what extent is environmental security important yet devalued, as are my research questions. On the 20th of December 2006, the international community expressed its deep concern through the General Assembly Resolution 61-194, considering that the oil slick has heavily polluted the shores of Lebanon and consequently has had serious implications for human health, biodiversity, fisheries, tourism, and livelihoods. The oil spill was probably the most visible environmental impact of the war, resulting in both short and long-term threats to the coastal marine environment and one of the biggest environmental catastrophes in the eastern Mediterranean Sea. The estimate of the UN of the cost of the oil spill in terms of harm to the Lebanese economy and cleaning up operations was $203 million. Simultaneously, the UN General Assembly passed a resolution calling upon Israel to assume responsibility for compensation for the costs of repairing the environmental damage and restoration of the marine environment. Israel's argument for the airstrike was directed towards Hezbollah, namely that they had crossed an internationally recognized border and kidnapped and killed Israeli soldiers. Thus, the resolution was an act of political demonization. One-third of Lebanon's coastline was affected. The Lebanese Ministry of Environment said 20,000 to 30,000 tons of heavy fueled oil spilled out in the sea and was considered the worst ecological disaster that has taken place in the oceans and a first time to happen outside the open sea. With the currents flowing towards the north in addition to Lebanon's coastline, Cyprus, Syria, Turkey, Greece, and even Israel were considered in danger. The fauna and the Mediterranean ecosystem suffered badly, and certain species got threatened with extinction, such as the endangered green and loggerhead sea turtles, in addition to the contamination of their nesting beaches and the exposure of future generations with long-term impacts on their health, such as cancer and reproductive impairment. After the spill, the oil was partly carried out to sea and partly dispersed northeast along the coast of Lebanon through the combined action of wind and water currents towards the southwest. Within 3 days, the area affected by the spill was reported to extend over at least 140 to 150 kilometers of the Lebanese coastline. A major fraction of the spilled oil emulsified and solidified along the shore, clinging to sand, rocks, and stones. Oil that remained on the water was more fluid, but it rapidly dried into a tarry residue once it was left on the beach. Surveys of the coastline identified 21 sites impacted by oil, representing a total length of 19.2 kilometers of coastline, including sites comprised of sand, rocks, gravel, and pebbles. Over parts of the shoreline, the oil was reported to be up to 50 centimeters deep. Greenpeace alerted authorities and the public to the presence of the seabed oil contaminated at the underwater slick in an area close to the GA power plant, and Byblos were smothered by sunken oil. As part of the international mitigation efforts, Greenpeace took part in several operations upon the request of the Lebanese Ministry of Environment until October 2006. Seabirds and early migrating bird species such as the curlews and plovers had been contaminated with oil during the preceding few weeks. According to a report in Maklathi newspaper, Lebanon was facing a major ecosystem failure. Turtles, dolphins, urchins, and corals were all infected. On Palm Island Natural Reserve off the coast of Tripoli, algae and other organisms on which fish and turtles feed had been killed. The reserve provides as well 156 bird species habitats, including migratory species. Generally, marine ecosystems in Lebanon waters have a high biodiversity, and there is a particular concern for the impact on reef communities. It is also possible that much of the mortality of marine animals may have gone undetected due to the conflict and airstrike blockade in operations at that time. After the oil spill, and based on the fact that there is a yearly migration of about 300 bird species through the coastal zone of Lebanon, Dr. Rick Steiner, an International Union of Conservation of Nature expert, estimated that some of them might have been exposed to oil residues remaining on the shoreline. Greenpeace conducted another scientific study to determine levels of oil and related chemical contamination in oysters collected from 6 key locations, 2 to the south of Jiyeh and 4 to the north, approximately 1 year after the spill. Initial screening analysis conducted by researchers at AUB indicated that oysters may have accumulated higher levels of oil-related contaminants than some common fish species in the region. To manage this crisis and the lack of resources, the Ministry of Environment requested assistance from no less than 31 countries, as well as the Regional Marine Pollution Emergency Response Center for the Mediterranean Sea, in addition to around 71 national and international organizations and 80 national NGOs. A waste management project was also put in place in order to safely collect and transport the polluting material from the shorelines to temporary storage sites. An Eastern Mediterranean Oil Spill Restoration Trust Fund, based on contribution from donor countries and organizations, to provide assistance and support to the state directly and adversely affected in their management of an environmentally sound sea and wildlife, from cleanup process to safe disposal of the oily waste that is on the shorelines of this environment disaster caused by the destruction of the oil storage tanks at the Jiyeh electric power plant. Kuwait sent 40 tons of material to thicken the oil and oil-absorbing products. As for Israel, damage assessment and cleanup operations were delayed by 4 weeks while Israel continued its bombing campaign. The objective of the entire call for help was to manage the environmental catastrophe by attaining funds to complete the cleanup. The total amount that was raised by donor countries and organizations was around $3 million. The cleanup efforts included the Dalia Fisherman Wharf and 3 sites between Jadra and Ras Saadiyat and 3 sites between Jiyeh and Beirut. Additional minor and pre-final cleanup activities at about 12 sites along the coast were carried out and monitored by the Ministry of Environment. A similar oil-related war catastrophe was the Gulf oil spills in 1991. Between 5 and 10 million barrels of oil poured into the Persian Gulf. In 1991, when Iraqi troops withdrew from their occupation of Kuwait, set fire to desert oil wells and opened the valves on oil rigs and pipelines. The spill devastated marine wildlife and coastal habitats in Kuwait and Saudi Arabia. The Gulf War oil spill was ranked the #1 worst oil spill at its time. An estimated 11 million barrels of oil were intentionally released to the Arabian Gulf in 5 months. More than 800 miles of Kuwait and Saudi Arabia beaches were oiled and marine wildlife was devastated. Oil birds had the hardest hit of any group of organisms and thousands lost their lives. With the available literature, I decided to review and visit the site myself and record the visible updates which I believe lacked. I tried contacting the Ministry of Environment but couldn't get any straight answer. The answers I got was that the information available on the official website was the only source of information they could provide. Another answer included that the issue is over 10 years and it would be hard to get back and dig up the information. And the final answer was that it was at the time of another minister and they would rather not answer. Thus, on Sunday, April 24, 2016, I decided to visit the Jiyeh site with professional divers and environmentalists to check if there were still any visible sites for the oil spillage that took place and to learn more about what actually happened and how the cleanup process went forth. When we reached the location, the site was somewhat clear. There were no signs of oil spillage. The area was cleared and things were back to normal. I could see how some of the rocks at the shore had a darker color than others, as well as the color of the water in that location. The diving center, which gave me assistance throughout my research, is made up of a group of volunteers who are self-funded and self-motivated and work on preserving the sea. I interviewed the owner regarding the 2006 oil spills in GA to understand more about their role and their participation in the process. A major part of the information provided was considered surreal because of its concrete nature. The owner, let's call him Jay, started off by describing the nature of the oil scattered at that time. He mentioned that the oil was of light and floating nature and did not go deep in any area except at the GA power plant location. He mentioned three reasons for this. A major issue which was omitted from the media was the fact that one of the tankers were hit by the airstrike. However, to avoid the dispersion of fire to other tankers and to the port nearby, the tankers were emptied from the oil, which went straight to the sea. With the force and density, the burning and the mixing of oil with the sands because of the waves, and the oil went 16 meters deep in that specific location. The propaganda on the media was purely for funding reasons. People wanted to get as much as they could. After these areas, the most infected areas were the Movenpick port, the sporting area, and the Long Beach. Ramlet Al Baida was as well seriously hit because of northern waves, which normally hit shores. It took 6 months to clean it up. The structure of Ras Beirut, the waves which hit the sea were southern waves, which pushed the oil to different regions, however in small quantities, and finally got dispersed outside our waters. It is true that cleaning efforts were held, however, most of the efforts did not need diver efforts and sophisticated equipment. Commercial divers were needed and not amateurs. The diving gear for regular divers could not be used. The oil on the sandy beaches were removed with the help of trucks. As for the oil at the superficial level of the sea, it was removed by huge hoses that sucked them into a container, which is basically why it did not cost much, but was manipulated by the government and other NGOs and experts. Another method of removing the oil from the surface was through cotton rolls. Jay mentioned that their job was a volunteering one, and they had contacted the Ministry of Environment, and all was done for free, although the ministry had lots of funds flowing in. As environmental activists, the members of the diving center used fundraising to supply their activity. On a final note, when I asked about the biodiversity of our sea, I got an affirmative answer. But Jay mentioned that this biodiversity existed a long time ago, and it has decreased today because of other types of pollutants, such as wastewater, the sewage, chemicals, and the increase in amateur and professional fishermen, which have nothing to do with the oil spills of 2006. During 2006, the marine life was barely hit because the oil did not cover vast areas and was dispersed very quickly due to the waves and tides. What I have learned from this experience goes beyond the issue of oil spills in the sea. I never thought of the sea from an actor-agent perspective in war literature. Throughout my fieldwork and the literature I came across, I came to realize that the action plan taken by the government, the different NGOs, and the environmentalists have proven that the controversy covered is a political one, and one which is of monetary nature, an aspect where the media is used for propaganda and used to collect more funds. I believe that my research focuses and revisits the 2006 GA oil spills in an all-new perspective. Many of us remember the war, minus this event and its impact on human and non-human livelihood. My research does not propose a policy recommendation, since current existing policies are enough and must be implemented. The main aim from my research was to depict the different networks and agents that assisted in the oil spills, see interaction and simultaneously interpretation. In this research, human and non-human actors have helped evaluate the matters of concern vis-a-vis matters of fact. Moreover, by flattening the surface and going from general to the particular model presented in Lebanon, it has been proven that the sea was and will always be a victim in various man-made disasters. For the future, I believe that this project will contribute to sea pollution awareness in addition to shedding light over the entry point that I have utilized and that have extremely assisted me in my research. It is important as well to focus on recovery, protection, and preservation of our ecology. Finally, I hope my findings have offered have offered you a whole new perspective on what really happened at that time and how the story was manipulated somehow, and how through assumptions we sometimes forget to ignore to look beyond the frame presented. The material provided in the literature review is the tip of the iceberg. The truth lies in the sea and at the level of the people who actually care about it. Thank you.